So, welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Amanda. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
You're very welcome. So, tell the listeners about you and what is a neurodivergent self-love coach?
Yeah, so that's my title. And I'm a life coach. I've been a life coach for a little over 4 years. And I have found through my own life story, the things that I've been through, that I myself am neurodivergent. And what I would say is that that means different things for different people. Some people feel it's a diagnosis like ADHD or ASD or something to that effect. I personally just think it's anyone in the world that identifies as having a brain that doesn't really fit in the structure of the way society works and what's sort of expected of you as far as how you should be able to handle things. So I really discovered from an early age that I'm really a sensitive person. And I think sensitive people are sensitive in every way. So I am sensitive, sensory sensitive, but I'm also emotionally sensitive. I am sensitive to pain. I just know that I'm very, very sensitive. And that's something that played out in my life in a very significant way because I really struggled with coping, especially all through my life, but really after I had my second baby, I had a really bad breakdown, was diagnosed with postpartum depression, went on antidepressants. They actually made things worse. Went to see a psychiatrist. He diagnosed me with a personality disorder and navigated all of that for years. And then I stumbled upon a marriage coach and I'm married. I've been married for 21 years and I have two kids, two teenagers. And she was the first person that said to me, everything you're telling me makes sense. Like, of course, this is happening for you and I can help you. And in working with her, I discovered that I could love myself, that I didn't need permission for that. Other people didn't need to validate that I could just do it. And actually, the more that I did that, the better, first of all, the better I felt. But because I felt better, I acted better. And when I did that, I was able to improve my marriage, which is why I hired her,
Mhm.
because I really recognized from the onset that I felt like I was the problem. And in fact, letting go of that thought was something that was really impactful. And so I know that's a really long answer to your question,
No, no, no. Keep going.
but ultimately what I discovered is, wow, my life could be so amazing. And that was the first time in my life that it felt that way. I mean, I had done all the things. I had gone to university, I got married, I had kids, I had so many friends. I had built this life and I felt so empty and so angry and so like really just dysregulated all the time. And I just really struggled. And so when I found this life coach and she taught me these principles, it just had such an enormous impact on my life. And I knew I needed to help other people do that. So I went ahead and got certified as a coach. And now that's what I help other women do. And I've been doing it, like I say, for over 4 years. And I think that it is just something that every woman needs to hear, probably every person, that loving yourself is something you can do no matter what. That is
Yep,
just the truth.
yep. I back that up. That is true, Amanda. So you said it's time to stop working against your brain and instead learn how to work with your brain. Can you elaborate on that?
Definitely. I find that what happens, in fact, I've just had a couple coaching calls this morning, and a lot of my coaching revolves around people talking about themselves in a way that is very, first of all, they feel like it's a fact. And second of all, it's very negative. And so, one client that I coached even yesterday was telling me that she was so mad at herself because she's a people pleaser. So, this is a good example. And I said to her, how do you feel when you're mad at yourself? Like when you're saying, I always am people pleasing and I hate that I do that. And, she felt frustrated and angry with herself and everything else. And, you know, we just started talking about how people pleasing is something, first of all, that every single person on the planet does, unless you're a complete narcissist.
Mhm.
Because, of course, we want to please other people. That is the way that we're built. We don't want to walk through the world not caring if we hurt somebody or if we negatively affect somebody. But if you really look at it, people pleasing is saying yes when you want to say no. And so ultimately, that comes from a place of not being regulated in yourself, not feeling safe. And it's actually a symptom of a stress response or a trauma response, right? That you would do that in that moment to try and manipulate the situation so that you could feel safe, even though you're doing what you don't want to do. And so when I'm thinking about working with your brain, it's letting yourself be yourself and understanding what do I want and what don't I want, and being able to, first of all, be able to work with your sensitivity and understand how to regulate yourself in a way that really works for you. And I just find there's a lot of advice in the world. There's a lot of different theories on how you can regulate yourself, right? I mean, I don't know, I can think of 10 tools off the top of my head, and I'm sure there's way more than that. So, whether or not you want to do EFT tapping, or if you want to go ahead and do meditation, or if you think cold plunging is for you, or whatever, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is what actually works for you. And that's what I'm always looking at. So if somebody says to me, oh, Amanda, I know I should meditate, but I don't, I always look at that as, well, meditating works, but only if you actually do it. So then let's find something that you can do. And using very simple things, for my clients, because most of them are quite sensitive, tapping into your senses can be such an effective tool. Let's use your sensitivity to actually regulate you. It's amazing. It works so well. You have this superpower and you don't even know it because you are so sensitive. You can use that to your advantage. So that's really what I mean in a nutshell, is taking those things that you think are so negative about you and using them to your advantage.
So, Amanda, during your sessions, do you use affirmations? Is that something you use with your clients or no?
Sometimes I like to get curious first about what's really going on. So before I would present an affirmation, something like nothing's going wrong here, or, I can really believe in myself, or any thought like that, what I want to know is, what are you thinking? And when we can see what we're thinking and we can break down, what does this do to me emotionally? And then when I feel that emotion, what actions do I take and what actions don't I take? And then what is the result that is created? And am I okay with this result? And then once we look at that, we can start really looking at the thoughts and potentially change. I always like to talk about changing the flavor of the thinking, because I'm like, we can change the flavor of what we think. And it doesn't mean that we go from negative to positive. I'm not a big fan of, just that toxic positivity. Right. Although sometimes I do like to confront myself with it, and I will confront my clients with, you could think the opposite about this. But as far as affirmations go, I mean, I have a new deck that I got when I was in Hawaii this year, and this beautiful vendor had all of her art, and she had these affirmation cards. And the one I pulled today, and I do love them, is it is never too late to make a change. And I think that they can be such a great tool. Yeah.
So, how does self-love help when someone is overly emotional?
hmm I think that self love helps because, for one thing, we live in a society that tells us that we're overly emotional. And I think that that's a really interesting statement, because what does it mean to be overly emotional? You're feeling an emotion, you're the one that's feeling it. Nobody else can feel it, only you. So only you really get to decide if that's overly emotional. Just want to offer that.
Mhm.
The second part is that if you can be there for yourself and be kind to yourself and be curious with yourself, that's going to really help you in that moment when you feel the emotion boiling over, when you find yourself reacting to emotion, be it sadness or grief, or be it anger and rage. When you feel that and you see that happening, a lot of times in the moment, it's not a problem from the standpoint of worrying about it because you're in it. It's usually what I find is the shame that we feel afterwards, having had that reaction that really causes like a lot of strife. And what can happen is when people are in that shame place, lots of times, shame just wants to hide, right? We just want to like cover it up and tuck it in a little box and pretend it isn't there. But then it will come up again and again and again. And what I find is that it dysregulates you even more. So Self-love is about looking at that reaction and going, oh my gosh, I'm a human being. And I wonder what was going on for me right there. And can I be kind and compassionate with myself and wonder what's happening that's pushing me to this place versus I'm so mad at myself because I acted in that way. And that's an unacceptable reaction. I shouldn't act like that.
So you do have a podcast as well. What
Do.
is your podcast about, Amanda? Do you talk about those same topics or is it something else?
I actually do talk about those topics and everything else as well. I think the podcast is called How to Love Yourself No Matter What. So it just falls in line, right?
Mhm.
I talk about all kinds of things on that podcast. I talk about emotion a lot because emotion is something that I find neurodivergent people in particular really struggle with. Talk about thoughts, changing your thoughts, productive thinking, nervous system regulation, but then also about relationships, about jobs, about all the things because they all matter.
So general, just life in general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, nicely, nice. So where can the listeners get in touch with you? And do you have like an upcoming book or something like that? Do you have resources on your website so people can actually go and then maybe get in touch with you and book a session?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently working on a journal, but it's not done. So I don't have that to offer right now. However, I do have a couple of resources that I think could be really helpful. So you can go to my website, which is just amandahess.ca. And on there, I have a resource called an anxiety reset. And it's a mini course, it's an audio course. So you
Mhm.
can go and register for that and you can download it onto your podcast player and listen to it just like this podcast. The other thing I have currently is I've opened up a new Facebook group. It's called the Self Love Club. I do journaling pop ups in that group. So if people would like to participate, if that's something that interests them, they can go to joinamanda.ca and they can get into that group.
Okay. So how can somebody begin this self-love process? How can they start that self-love? Is there like a specific way to start it, or is it different for everybody?
I don't know that there's a specific way to start it. I think the first thing is like putting it out in the universe as this is something that I want. And, I think that sometimes people think that self love is a destination and it isn't. It is a practice. It is something that you will always do. And so the more you do it, the better you get at it. If I were to say, where do you get started? I think that you could start by just asking yourself, what are the things that I disapprove of about myself? And then you can ask yourself the question, what would it look like to love myself unconditionally with those things still being a part of me? And to me, that starts opening your mind up to the possibility that you don't need to be perfect to be lovable.
Nicely said, Amanda. Do you have any last words for the listeners about trying out new ways to treat themselves?
That's a great question. I think that one of the things that is the hardest for every single person I coach, and it's interesting, is being able to tap into what you want. So I find we become adults and then we forget that we're allowed to want things. And then when you're asked, what do you want? And you realize you don't know the answer, we can panic, right? I've
Yeah.
seen it happen a lot. So tap into pleasure. Start thinking small, tiny things. Like, really consider, what do I like to smell? And could I bring that into my office, into my car, into my bathroom? And make that a very purposeful thing. And then think about, what do I like to see? When you're thinking about your space, I find this a lot with people that work in offices. They don't have things that they love looking at in their office. So, like, go buy something beautiful, put it in your office because it's actually going to help you with that. Little tiny things like that have a bigger impact than big giant things. And you just want to keep layering it. And that's where I would say you can start.
Wow. Well, Amanda, thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I really appreciate it.